Good morning, I'm Dave Christie with your LaRouche Organization Daily Update for Friday, August 22nd. So let me just immediately start by saying that if you haven't registered for today's International Peace Coalition meeting, do so immediately. You can find that on the Schiller Institute site. That, of course, has been led, the International Peace Coalition has been led by Helga Tsepp-LaRouche. I believe this will be the 116th consecutive meeting. So Scott Ritter will be joining the meeting today, in addition to Helga Tsepp-LaRouche providing an overview. But Ritter will report on his recent trip to Russia, where he met with various, kind of a people-to-people diplomacy operation, and we'll undoubtedly have some insights from that as well as strategic analysis. Ritter, of course, was a former whistleblower, weapons inspector, and then became a whistleblower concerning the faked intelligence that went into crafting the Iraq War, and otherwise is a very prominent analyst that has insights into the current situation. So I'm sure that Helga Tsepp-LaRouche will reiterate her call that Donald Trump should join Presidents Putin and Xi Jinping in the upcoming commemoration on September 3rd for the end of World War II, to have a trilateral summit, perhaps including Modi as well. But anyway, the point of that summit would be to deal with the unfolding collapse of the transatlantic system and the need for a new development and security architecture to bring the economic development perspective that Helga Tsepp-LaRouche has been fighting for, to connect the world under a world land bridge, which could be done through the Bering Strait, which I'm sure Helga will be discussing at the International Peace Coalition. So sign up for that if you have not already. Now, I want to cover how the importance of that project as being the end of British geopolitics and our connection to the British through the so-called special relationship, which I think is important to discuss in light of some of the ongoing revelations by Tulsi Gabbard and as the Director of National Intelligence concerning matters of Russiagate. Now, one of the things that we identified in the white paper that the LaRouche Organization put out, called "The Worse Than Treason, the Actual Motive Behind Russiagate," is indeed the British role in Russiagate and what the true intent of Russiagate was for, which was to ensure that Trump's campaign, what he said during the campaign, that he intended to have good relations with Russia as well as China, but that the British intended to sabotage that, to keep the proxy war that they had been organizing using Ukraine as a battering ram against Russia, that was done through the course of the Obama administration. And they wanted to ensure that that policy would be allowed to continue, and that Trump's proposals for dialogue and peace with Russia would not interfere with that. As identified in that white paper, this goes back a long time. The British and Churchill were working on a project called Operation Unthinkable, which was to invade the Soviet Union even before the end of the war, that ostensibly the British and the Soviet Union, as well as the United States, were allies in that war to defeat the Nazi operation in Europe. And so, of course, they intended to already even before the war was over, wanted to destroy the Soviet Union. So some things never change. Now, key to the British intent to keep the United States as the brawn for the geopolitical games cooked up in their fevered brains, the British, given that Operation Unthinkable failed, they launched the Cold War instead, and Churchill lowered the Iron Curtain as well as launched the Empires of the Mind. Now, central to that relationship, the so-called special relationship, was the nearly seamless intelligence sharing between GCHQ and NSA. Now, I'm just going to cover, as people have probably seen, the recent revelations from Gabbard. She had a list of 37 intelligence officials who have had their security clearances yanked, and supposedly, or at least what's coming into headlines today, is an unnamed CIA official, a very senior analyst, according to media reports, was among those, and apparently has also resigned now from that post that she had at CIA, but allegedly she was involved in stoking the narratives and involved in the writing of the intelligence community assessment that that John Brennan and Jim Clapper had not taken the advice of senior intelligence officials, including Mike Rogers of NSA, who, as we know from emails, Mike Rogers had said that he didn't have access to the intelligence, particularly that of the DNC hack. This is where the narrative was spun that the Russians hacked the DNC database and released emails that embarrassed Hillary Clinton and John Podesta because they were trying to run a coup and sabotage the campaign efforts of Bernie Sanders. And of course, those emails were released to WikiLeaks and were a key factor in sinking Hillary's campaign. And subsequently, the narrative was spun that the DNC hacked the intelligence, hacked the DNC and released that intelligence in order to prop up their puppet Donald Trump. So that's how the narrative was spun. But I think just to cover some aspects related to that special relationship between GCHQ and NSA, as the white paper from the LaRouche organization covers, Robert Hannigan, in addition to Christopher Steele and Richard Dearlove and others of the British stripe that were involved in the Steele dossier and so forth, but it was the meeting between Robert Hannigan and John Brennan in the summer of 2016, which played a crucial role in the whole Russiagate narrative. Now, we don't know what they discussed at that meeting, but likely it was on the matter of the cyber penetration, or the alleged cyber penetration, given Robert Hannigan was the head of the GCHQ, which is the NSA equivalent. Notably, he did not meet with Mike Rogers, as one would assume that he would. And perhaps, as we now know, Rogers was not on board with the narrative surrounding the so-called hack. Now, I think just to cover Hannigan, again, he resigned in the immediate days after Trump's inauguration, when the reports had emerged in the media that GCHQ had provided an intelligence bypass to NSA, allowing for the surveillance of Trump's campaign and transition team, which is illegal for the NSA and other intelligence communities to be involved in that kind of surveillance. So Hannigan resigns. However, he does not fade away into the sunset. And I want to cover a couple of things that he was involved in and how this intersects some of the concerns of Mike Rogers while he was the head of NSA. What Hannigan did is he was one of the key correspondents for the House of Lords report that was entitled UK Foreign Policy in a Shifting World Order. This was a number of top British political class and as well as intelligence officials who were concerned, particularly that Trump's presidency could mean the ending of the special relationship. One of the correspondents of that, Lord Ricketts, in that report said that our strategic partnership with the U.S. right across the defense area, including the very important area of nuclear and the intelligence relationship, He said that these were absolutely vital pillars of our national security, and was concerned that with the election of Trump, that it is very important that they should not be. In other words, the intelligence sharing and nuclear warfare issues should not be affected by the election of Trump. Now, in the footnote, it says that Robert Hannigan made a similar point. So what did Hannigan do after he left GCHQ? Well, one thing he did was he joined a cybersecurity firm known as Blue Voyant. This was chock full of NSA and FBI and IDF Unit 8200. Many of these individuals were involved in information operations and psychological warfare at their respective agencies. And so Hannigan joins Blue Voyant. He also joins the Harvard Belfer Center. It was called the Cyber Project. He becomes a senior fellow there. Now, that was run by an individual named Eric Rosenbach, who used to be the cyber czar was known as the cyber czar for the Pentagon, and also the former chief of staff of the Defense Secretary Ash Carter. Rosenbach actually set up this operation, and it's defending digital democracy with Robbie Mook and Matt Rhodes, who were the campaign managers for Hillary Clinton and Mitt Romney. So you get a sense of what was going on there. Now, in addition to I should say this, joining Hannigan at Harvard's Belfer Center and Blue Voyant was a woman named Deb Plunkett. Now, Deb Plunkett was a NSA official who used to head what was called the Information Assurance Directorate. Now, what Information Assurance Directorate was involved in was outreach to Silicon Valley, academia, and foreign partners, assumedly GCHQ and others within the Five Eyes intelligence sharing community. Now, given that the fact that the Harvard's Belfer Center, where Hannigan and Plunkett both were, that was identified within the congressional investigations into what was called the censorship industrial complex, Harvard's Belfer Center was identified as one of the leading centers of academia that were involved in leaning on Silicon Valley firms to censor different people on social media who did not toe the line, the establishment line, particularly such as issues of those that questioned the outcome of the 2020 elections, among other matters. And the whole premise of all of the organizations of the censorship industrial complex were, of course, that Russia had hacked the elections and was interfering with the information space and so on. So anyway, this Information Assurance Directorate was involved in this outreach to Silicon Valley, academia, and again, foreign partners. Now, of note, when Mike Rogers came into the NSA, he came in immediately after the abuses identified by Snowden in his various leaks, which not only showed the surveillance operations that were going on by both NSA and GCHQ, but also showed the kind of information operations and psychological warfare, this so-called J-Trig that was identified as a GCHQ operation to influence cyber, through cyber means, influence social media posts and shape narratives and all these matters. Those were part of what was identified by Snowden. But anyway, Rogers came in after the Snowden affair, and of course that Keith Alexander was identified as overseeing a lot of these NSA abuses. But what Rogers intended to do was to split the Information Assurance Directorate that had been headed by Deb Plunkett away from the more traditional signals intelligence. Those two had been merged. The Information Assurance Directorate and Signals Intelligence had been merged earlier, and assumedly due to the kind of NSA abuses that Snowden exposed, Rogers intended to split them up. Now, of note, after Rogers left NSA in 2018, the Signals Intelligence wing of NSA and the Information Assurance Directorate, again as headed by Deb Plunkett at an earlier point, they were re-merged or reconnected under what was called the Cybersecurity Directorate. That was headed by Ann Neuberger, formed in 2019. Now, the Cybersecurity Directorate was earlier known as the Russia Small Group, or was the outgrowth of what was called the Russia Small Group, also headed by Ann Neuberger. Now, the Russia Small Group was formed effectively after the DNC hack, which again, the head of NSA, Mike Rogers at the time, said he hadn't seen the evidence of that hack. But nonetheless, his subordinates at NSA, like Ann Neuberger, were apparently citing this so-called hack as the basis for the formation of the Russia Small Group, which then was formalized as the Cybersecurity Directorate, which again merged these two elements of NSA, Information Assurance Directorate, and Signals Intelligence that Rogers had previously tried to break up. But anyway, the Russia Small Group also became what was called the Election Security Group. And in the 2018 midterms, Ann Neuberger was the head of that, as well for the NSA side, as well as on the Cyber Command side, was headed by Timothy Hawk, who was just fired as the head of NSA earlier this year. So you can kind of see that a lot of these operations are woven together, and I think it should just be noted that the Cybersecurity Directorate had a mirror agency at GCHQ called the National Cybersecurity Center, and that was actually formed by Hannigan before he left GCHQ. I think it was formed in October of 2016, and worked extremely closely. The head of it, Kieran Martin, cited his relationships with Ann Neuberger and the head of CISA, Chris Krebs, citing that as a core of the transatlantic relationship. In fact, Kieran Martin and Chris Krebs actually had a fireside chat at the Billington Cyber Conference, which discussed the U.S.-UK special cyber relationship. So I think given Hannigan's role in the coup d'etat as head of GCHQ at that time, it is now time to end this special relationship, and certainly what Tulsi Gabbard is doing at DNI is of note on that. And what we intend to do is ensure that it is focused on getting to the root cause of what the Russiagate operation was about, which was to destroy the potential relations between the United States and Russia. Now, as far as what needs to be done moving forward, the real way to end the special relationship would be to unify the emerging development perspective on the Eurasian landmass, known as China's Belt and Road Initiative, with the United States and the Americas at large, and to unify those two development policies through the Bering Strait. Now, on that note, there was a Pravda article which covered the Bering Strait and cites Peter Kuznick. This is somebody who is a researcher from the American University in Washington, D.C., that is. Somebody who also has a long familiarity with the work of Lyndon and Helga Tsepp-LaRouche. But he made the article cites his following observation, which he is said, quotes, the article is quoted as saying, "The visit of the Russian president could mean the beginning of economic cooperation between the two countries. There are a lot of rare earth minerals in the Arctic. We could organize a joint project to develop them." Also discussed, again, this is what Peter Kuznick is saying. Also discussed was the tunnel through the Bering Strait, which is being discussed both here and in Russia. This is a major high-speed railway project connecting Eurasia and the United States. But were that to go through, this would be the end of the reign of the British geopolitical dynamic on the planet. And moreover, with the exposés of Russiagate, we could end the so-called special relationship, given that this has been nothing but the kind of, well, as we see with Russiagate, has been essentially a coup run by the British to destroy Trump's presidency in his first term, and I am sure they are up to their tricks at this point now. So that's what we intend to do at the LaRouche organization, and you should join the International Peace Coalition today. You can sign up on the Schiller Institute site if you are not signed up already, and otherwise stay tuned to the LaRouche